Historians will probably never cease to argue over what exactly transpired in the bunker beneath the Chancellery during those last days of the Third Reich. But now, with the release of the final papers of Operation Myth, that infamous 1946 Soviet investigatory report, there is no longer any need to speculate over what it was that Hitler, Eva Braun, and Dr. Goebbels were reading during their final days. When it becomes clear that the siege isn't going to end anytime soon, Hitler orders a box of the classics of High German literature to be brought down into the bunker. But somehow, the box gets switched with a carton of books from the 1939 Decadent Art Show. Hitler ends up with an entire box full of books and magazines written by Jews and homosexuals. Hitler is furious, but there's nothing he can do. The Soviets are closing in, and there's no one who can be spared to look for a missing box full of Goethe and Hölderlin. But Hitler desperately wants something to read, so on April 25th, he breaks down and begins rummaging through the box, hoping that maybe he can find something that isn't entirely Jewish or gay. But to his dismay, he discovers that his dog has been using the box as a toilet. Now Hitler is really furious. He takes the box outside and empties the books onto the rubbish heap. He's so mad, he almost doesn't notice the slim volume that has somehow escaped his canine's bowel movements and urinary excretions. It's a copy of the 1936 Zeitschrift für Sozialforschung, a journal published by a bunch of German Jewish intellectuals living in exile. The journal contains one long essay entitled The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction by Walter Benjamin. It's most definitely something Hitler would never choose to read on his own, but beggars can't be choosers, so Hitler brings the journal back into the bunker and shows it to Goebbels. Goebbels is aghast when he hears the Führer say that he'd like the two of them to sit and read and discuss Walter Benjamin's essay together. "Do you know who Walter Benjamin is?" Goebbels shouts. "No," Hitler says, "I don't." Walter Benjamin was a Jewish intellectual who left Germany when the Nazis came to power. He wrote essays about decadent writers like Proust, Kafka, Baudelaire, and Bertolt Brecht. He hated the Nazis, and he wrote hideous things about them from his perch in Paris. When the French capital was finally sacked, the Gestapo seized his apartment and discovered essays on everything from Donald Duck to hashish. Walter Benjamin himself committed suicide on the Spanish border on September 26, 1940, when it became apparent that he would be turned over to the Nazis for lack of a French exit visa. Goebbels pleads with Hitler to throw the essay on the rubbish heap where it belongs, but Hitler is adamant, and so on the night of April 30th, the two sit down together and begin reading The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. Walter Benjamin's essay begins with the thesis that the mechanically reproduced work of art is something radically different from the reproduced art of the past. He says it makes no sense to speak of originals when discussing photographs or films, for the relationship between the photograph and the negative is totally different than the relationship between the painting and the copy. But what Benjamin finds most interesting about this new relationship is the disintegration of the aura and the authenticity of the work of art. So far, so good. Hitler's able to follow along. But, he asks his Minister of Propaganda, is Benjamin arguing that this disintegration is a good thing? Yes, Goebbels says. Benjamin believes that the aura and the authenticity inherent in traditional works of art are what keep them firmly in the possession of the elites, and what's allowed oppressive ideologies to control them. And, Goebbels explains, Benjamin believes that the artworks of the future, the ones that will evolve from new media, will, by lacking aura and authority, not only have the power to emancipate themselves from control, but will assist in the emancipation of the masses as well. But how, Hitler asks. He's starting to think that reading this essay wasn't such a hot idea after all. Well, for example, Goebbels says, Benjamin believes the film is one of these new artworks, and he believes that film is something that by lacking an aura and an authority will expand the mind of the audience to the point where the audience will one day relate to the film in a way that allows it to think beyond the commodity value of artistic experience. Benjamin believes that in the future, the audience will cease to be merely the receiver of cultural meaning, but will instead become an empowered producer of cultural meaning. But that's dreadful, Hitler exclaims. That goes against everything I stand for. And to think I let you make all those movies. Goebbels rolls his eyes. Mein Führer, Benjamin is wrong. I am your minister of propaganda. Trust me, I know all about the production of meaning, and I know all about the mechanicals of reproduction, and I tell you, this Jew is wrong. His argument is completely flawed. For the media that he believes will deliver the world from fascism are themselves the instruments of fascism. I mean, where does he think these films come from? The Moscow Central Planning Committee? But Goebbels, Hitler says, it doesn't matter if they're instruments of fascism or instruments of socialism. The point is that they sow the idea that authority is something that does not have to be taken seriously, but rather something open to interpretation. Oh God, Goebbels, Hitler moans. Think of our children. What will become of them? They will have no respect for authority or tradition. I can see it now. Little blonde German boys and girls marching through the streets, demanding that they be taken seriously as producers of meaning. It's just dreadful. Dreadful. No, mein Führer. Goebbels pounds his fist on the table. Benjamin is wrong. The production of meaning will always be controllable. And if the youth want to believe that there's something empowering in the watching of films, so be it. They should be allowed to deceive themselves, especially if it means they will forget about the real mechanisms of control, the means of production itself. Mein Führer, I don't want to boast, but I believe I've shown the world that total control of media is indeed possible. People are sheep, and they will always be sheep. And if they want to believe this empowerment cock and bull, so be it. It will only make our job easier. But Hitler is not convinced. He stays up all night weeping over Walter Benjamin's ideas and their seeming inevitability. And in the morning, he paints a final watercolor, and then he puts a gun into his mouth and blows out the back of his skull. Goebbels spends the following day writing a scathing response to Walter Benjamin. He explains in detail how film is at its core a fascist art form, and how naive it is to believe, as Benjamin does, that film can emancipate the masses. Far from it. The film will guarantee their eternal enslavement. He describes his vision of the future. Millions and millions of captivated spectators all watching a screen upon which his descendants project images of fairies and sugar plums. Oh, the magnificent aura of the film. Goebbels spends all day on his essay, but when night falls, he realized that it is unfortunately a total betrayal of his profession, so he burns the manuscript in the fireplace. Then he kills his wife Magda and his 6 daughters, and finally, with a flourish befitting a man of his stature, he takes his own life.